Welcome to Chat TPT, a podcast about music business from the unique perspective of content creators in the trumpet community. We are so excited to have you here with us today as we dive into the world of trumpet playing, content creation, and everything in between. We hope that you'll find a supportive and inclusive space with us where musicians from all backgrounds can learn, collaborate, and support one another.
I've been doing a lot of things out of spite and resentment this week.
Love it.
Because I've recognized the power of the motivation that comes from spite. Um, it's one thing to be really upset about your life and to feel sorry for yourself and etc. And like those things, despite what people might think, in the right context, those things can be really healthy, because you don't want to bottle up your emotions for too long. They start to become toxic and they start to eat away at you from the inside. So it's good to get it out there. But if you don't do anything about it, then you know, you're just going to run into the same problem over and over again, right? So like after you're like, man, life is terrible. Then you have to say, okay, well, now what am I going to do about it? And I have found that, making my life better as a way to spite my circumstances is something that is somewhat therapeutic for me. It really always has been. But only about maybe 5 or so years ago did I acknowledge it specifically for what it was and take deliberate actions to use it as motivation. Because some days otherwise you're just discouraged, right? You're like, man, I've been trying all of these things, and all these other things that happened out of my control stopped me from achieving whatever goal it was. And we talked a little bit about being in marginalized cultures and social structures that prohibit our success by using the same effort that certain counterparts of ours do. And it stinks, but also it just means like when life is hard, you have to be harder than your circumstances in your life and to outdo the things that are placed against you to help you to succeed. That's been a part of my life. It's one of those things that I don't, I don't expect anyone to feel sorry for me about. It's not something that it's not something that has changed in my life. It's just a part of the way that I grew up. I haven't known it any different. So it's not like life is harder for me than it ever has been. If I would want to put it that way. But that being said, we live in particular situations now, similar to what we spoke about last week, where it's less of race, gender, culture, socioeconomic background, and it's more just the way people view musicians and the overall career, and then now in this world, the rapidly unstable progression of our economy in a direction that is just so very concerning. Yeah. So essentially, what I've been dealing with the past few weeks, especially, but really the past, like ever since I started my career as a professional, but over the past few weeks in particular, is just me waking up in my bank account balance having like literally thousands of dollars less than I expected it to because of things that happened that were beyond my control. And so what I found recently is that I'm just really angry and bitter in a way that I don't usually like to be. But rather than me trying to, stop myself from processing the emotions, just allow myself to fully process the emotions and say, okay, great, I am angry. I am very upset about my situation. I'm angry that, it feels like the world is out to get me. And you know what? Let's just pretend like it is. It really isn't. Life is life. But the way I feel, let's just pretend like everyone hates me and the world is out to get me. Okay, great. What am I going to do about it? And usually the answer and when I'm in that state of mind is, I don't give a flying rat's tail if the entire world's against me. I'm still going to succeed no matter what. So, screw them type of deal. Which is good, which is a great thing to like. It's great to acknowledge the reality that no, the world isn't against you. I mean, listen, I have so many people who advocate for me and support me and, are willing to, give their entire career to help my career succeed. And I'm super, super grateful for it. but it doesn't stop the fact that you can use some of those feelings of frustration when things don't go your way to motivate you to be, to succeed in the end. And to me, if the end result is that I'm better off than I was before I was going through that situation, then it's a victory. The only caveat, of course, is if you take it out on anyone else, right? So I just have to not, you know, be a jerk to anyone else. You just use it to be my own personal motivation, and there I am. So anyway, that's my long answer. That's my full answer to you asking me before we started recording, how am I doing this week? That is the answer. So I've gotten a lot of things done this week that I normally wouldn't have gotten done, and that's why it's just like, yeah, life is really hard, and so I'm going to be harder than the circumstances that have been presented to me and overcome whatever challenges that are in front of me. So here I am.
That's really amazing. Honestly, like kudos to you.
Oh,
Like
thank you.
I know it's been a tough while for like I mean a lot of us, but also like with
Mhm.
just everything that you've been through in the last few years and like emergency things like come up and you have to spend money like
Yeah.
um we've had some health issues in our cast here and they had to be taken to the ER and they're like, "Oh, look, an $8,000 bill." And
Ridiculous.
it's like, where am I gonna get that money? And it's like, well, you have to, it's important to like get help when you need it, but the fact that so often it's so expensive to get that
Yeah.
help is just so discouraging. And it does feel like everything's against you and the whole world is just like, well, let's just watch them struggle.
Yep. Yeah. Just to exist, right? Like you just because being sick is a part of being human,
Mhm.
like why does that cost you so much depending on what, if you're sick for, I mean my wife was sick for a couple weeks recently, and it's like she handles everything really well, but what it meant was that she couldn't go to work. So it was like, all right, we miss an entire paycheck just because she's sick. Like how is that fair, and that's a reality for a lot of people, and it's really frustrating because you get punished for literally being human.
Yeah.
That doesn't, yeah, that doesn't sit well with me. It never has. So
And
yeah.
for like taking care of yourself,
Hmm.
like you could, and taking care of others, because if you show up to work sick, you have the risk of making other people sick.
Exactly.
And then also, I mean, I'm really bad about that because I'm always the kind of person that's like, oh, I feel sick, but I'm fine. Like I can do my job, like I can get through it, I can do whatever. And then I end up being sick for way longer than I would have been.
I wonder if
Uh,
it's the chicken versus the egg conversation when we talk about that, right? Because like as music majors, we're kind of conditioned to be that way. But I wonder if it's almost like in order to be a music major, you have to be that way coming into it. I don't know.
I also feel like it's a lot to do with our society, like especially like in North America. I've heard like differences between like the work culture between North America and like Europeans, and it's just like we're all about that grind and like always working and we always need to be doing something to like be pushing ourselves forward and
Yeah.
like not taking breaks. And I feel like my entire life, anytime that I've taken a break or time to like sit down and do something for fun, I start feeling guilty about it because I'm like, oh, I'm not doing something productive. But you're supposed to live your life. Like, you're supposed to, the reason we work is so that we can do the things that we enjoy outside of work. Life is not all about work.
Yeah, in theory, that's what it's supposed to be like, right?
Ideally.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was thinking about that yesterday because I joined a water ski team here. It's just like a local
Ooh,
club and they like
yeah.
practice and stuff. And I was driving out to practice last night and I was like, this is great. Like, I love everything about my life right now. Like, I go and I play trumpet all day. My day off, I teach my lessons and I teach my students, which yesterday all of my lessons went really well. So I had a really good
Yay.
I had a really good feeling coming out of them. Sometimes, students get frustrated and then I get frustrated, like I'm trying to help them and it's just like a constant battle. And it's like I'm never mad at the students, but it's just like the situations that we go through. Like everyone made great progress. So that makes me happy. And then I
That's
went out
great.
and I water skied. And I was just like, this is great. Like I could do this probably for the rest of my life.
I know. I wish life could always be that way.
I know.
Like, do we have to go through hard times to progress? I know the answer. I don't want to know the answer, but it'd be nice if you could just, get up every day, and then every day life is just uh Gucci. Every day of your life, you're just like, oh yeah, I'm living the life. Everything's perfect, right?
I
Um,
think that the challenges that we face and like the struggles that we overcome make those good moments like even better. Because I mean, like if
it's
everything
true.
was just normal, no up and down, I mean, nobody wants to have bad times all the time. But I mean, there's always going to be struggles. There's always going to be like challenges that we have to face. And it's honestly for me, it feels so rewarding to overcome those challenges and be like,
Yeah.
yeah, I did it. It's like in a video game where like you finally beat that level.
When you said that, I immediately started thinking, well, first of all, yes, it is. I mean, the perspective is what makes gratitude as sweet as it can be. But when you said that, I immediately thought about my childhood. So when I was a kid, when I was a child, my parents, an act of wisdom, although I hated it as a child, they gave us time periods, like small timers on our video game consumption. And I was a very competitive playing video games in general. But when I was like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old, like when I first started playing video games, I was playing like the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and we were playing like Super Mario Brothers. And I never ended up beating Super Mario Brothers because we had like it was depending on the day and circumstance, it was anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour we could play at a time, and then we had to stop playing, you know. So there is a level on World 8 of Super Mario Brothers that I just couldn't beat in an hour. so so every time I had to like, yeah, I would get to a point and then my timer would end, and then I come back and I go back to the beginning, and then like, so I'd never beat that world. And it was the most, it was literally like decades later when I was like, I'm gonna go back and beat this stupid game. And it was like, I accomplished a lot of things in life, right? It's like I've, graduated high school, I'd gotten my first degree and whatnot, and like the army band had toured around with my piece suite for six trumpets, and like all these great and amazing, incredible things. None of them felt as good as me beating Bowser in a video game from the 1980s.
Hey,
But
but
I
you
was
know
on
what?
top of
Like,
the world. It was because of all of that conflict for the past, during my childhood. It was like, okay, good. My childhood is officially solved. I lived a good childhood now because I have slayed my demons. It's all good.
that's another thing. Like, bring it back to just playing in general. It's similar. Like when when I was in undergrad and I was playing certain solo pieces, I'm like, it's really, really hard. And then coming
Yeah.
back a few years later, after I, developed and grown as a player, and I come back and I'm like, hey, this is pretty easy. I like it.
Yeah.
It's like another challenge to overcome. And like, even though you did overcome it before, you're overcoming it in a different way because you've evolved as a person as well.
Yeah. It is that part is really rewarding about your career when you go to a certain point and you go back and you revisit certain things. I actually had the experience recently as I went back to. It's funny. So you made your post about like, remember when I used to play classical music, which is so relatable. Because I teach students who are learning classical music, and I basically play it when they play it. That's basically all that's all that I have the opportunity to do nowadays, because I am whenever I pick up my trumpet, I'm doing something other than classical music, and I don't have many gigs that call for it. And for the past couple years at least, I haven't taught my own dedicated applied lesson studio. I taught private lessons at the college level for my first 5 years of my career, but right now I'm not doing that. So there's nothing to force me into putting together a classical music repertoire. And the last recital I did was classical music, but it was all new music. It was music by all living composers. So the Haydn concerto I haven't touched in years, the Berma concerto, etc. And I had the opportunity. Was it yesterday? I don't know, maybe a couple days ago. I just went out on online, and I was just like, the internet has grown very vast over the past few years. I wonder what resources are here that weren't there when I was in college. So I basically was just looking for to see how many backing tracks of music that we'd played. exist online now, and surprisingly, it's a lot. There's apparently a MIDI rendition of the entire Artunian concerto, so like the orchestra part, the orchestra accompaniment to it, which that piece isn't in the public domain, so I don't know.
Very illegal.
Hopefully they, yeah. I'm gonna willing suspension of disbelief that they that it's been claimed by YouTube's content ID system, and that it's being, that revenue is being paid off to the people for whom those rights owed. Otherwise, they are breaking the law. So we're just going to assume that they're not, and that it's all taken care of. But it's pretty high quality, in the MIDI side of things, and it's very interesting and enticing. Like, I was thinking to myself, I probably would have been more apt to learn these pieces in college, when I was in college, if I had those things in front of me, because it's a lot easier to have fun, when you feel like there's music behind you to play with, than it is when you're just sitting behind four walls and trying to learn things, and imagine the parts that are there. At least for me, some people actually love that, but for me, I love to be able to play with an accompaniment behind me. So it's been really fun. But when I've returned to some of those solos that I played in college, it was like, oh, right, like, this is not hard for me anymore, because it's been all of this time trying to perfect my craft, literally, over half of my life trying to perfect one craft of blowing air through a piece of metal over and over and over again.
I'm making fart sounds. Anyone ever asks what I do, I'm like, I just make fart sounds, bro. Like, that's what I do. I get paid to make farts.
Professional fart sound makers. Professional children, which is a great job, by the way. It's the best job.
I love it. It's fabulous. Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh, we were gonna talk about manifestation.
Okay.
Do you still want to?
I'm so down.
Okay.
I'm very, very down.
If this was a YouTube video, it'd be terrible retention. Like, if we had a title and it was like manifestation and the law of attraction, and then how many,
talking about everything
19 else. Minutes into recording, oh yeah, by the way, we're actually going to fulfill on the title and thumbnail of your video. Halfway into
this is what happens when two people with ADHD make a podcast. There's no rhyme or reason. Everything's just like bleh.
Which I hope is like something that people are going to appreciate too, right? Like, because that's really how, that's how the human mind, at least our human minds, work, and I don't know, like I mentioned, I alluded to, at the beginning of, when I started recording, like, there's no use like rejecting the natural part of who you are if you can use it to your benefit. And it's therapeutic to allow yourself to just kind of progress in a way that is organic and natural. And like, if my mind is rapid fire between one thing to the next thing to the next thing to the next thing, and that's how I learn. I don't know if you heard that. I
did hear that. That was lovely.
Hopefully that wasn't super like, yeah. Hope that's not a rip headphone users moment. But rapid fire between things. I mean, if that's how you learn and grow and develop, then okay, fine. Just have a to-do list and make sure the things that need to get done, right? But like, it's okay. It's okay to do that, So anyway,